You can say it.
Well, not so loud. No. That's all you, buddy.
Low. Luke.
Should we sing to each other?
Sure. What kind of voice would you like to sing in?
My falsetto voice.
Oh, I like this. We're doing voices.
Hey, Mike.
Do you have any offensive voices?
You're Mike Wood.
No,
I'm offended by this one.
No offensive voices. I'm very vanilla and generic.
Well, if you like vanilla and generic, tune in because we're starting episode 4. So we're going with episode 4 of the Starship Rift podcast. You may be watching on the Time Rift arcade channel, or you may be watching on the Electric Starship arcade channel, or you may be listening via...
Could be listening on Spotify. Or Pandora. Or Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts. You know about that?
I do know about Apple Podcast.
Fantastic.
Actually, I think Pandora might have got rid of their podcast. So you might not be on there anymore. I don't remember.
If you're still listening to Pandora, you may not be hearing us. So anyway, so this is episode 4. And episode 4, if you listen to episode 3, we touched on it, is all about arcade games that you played in the arcade and you were super excited about. But you had to go play them in the arcade and you had to go home at night. But you got home at night and you're dreaming about going back to the arcade and playing it. And then finally, some company via, the Toys R Us or Best, what was it? Yeah. Best? What was it? Edison's?
Best.
Edison's was another service merchandise. Wherever you purchased your video console.
Kmart. You could put on layaway.
You could layaway boys. What's up?
I did a lot of layaway at Walmart.
Layaway, yeah. So Kmart's was my favorite, man. You get icy.
Yep.
And but Toys R Us, I remember picking up games there. And the little cards, you pull the card out
you
of the...
flip it up and see the back of the box.
Yes.
And you're looking, oh, dude, I love it.
We'll get into that. But anyway, so you play these games in the arcade and they're made a home port. And that's what we're going to talk about today is the ports to these different home consoles and how, for better or worse, some of them were fantastic ports and they got really good. Some of them sucked. So they weren't
very
good.
Much so.
They're terrible. So we've done some research. We've played some games and we're going to talk about ports. And we can talk about anything you want to talk about in any order you want to talk about. I'm just going to give you a little framework to do it in. But before that, let's talk about what's going on in the current arcade industry, arcade news. So does anyone have any arcade news? I have a little. When you're watching this podcast, I may be at Texas Pinball Festival. We're having Texas Pinball Festival in March. And we'll put the dates somewhere along here. I don't know where you want to put the dates on this, but anyway, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I'll be there, and we are getting so much goodness, pinball goodness for you guys. Yeah. Everyone is going to be storming to the Electric Starship Arcade to play not 1, not 2, but 3 new pinball machines near the end of March.
Ooh, very good. Very
Pretty
good.
Your wallet a little lighter today?
Huh?
Your wallet a little lighter today?
Yes. Hey, thanks for coming by, guys, this weekend because you helped pay for a pinball machine.
I heard pinball machines are very cheap.
Well, they're so cheap.
So cheap.
They're made cheap. No, I'm just kidding. Pinball machines are expensive. Please be gentle with the 3 new pinball machines. Literally, we're going to change a third of our lineup in March. And if you're in the local area, or if you're not, travel to the Texas Pinball Festival in Frisco, Texas.
And this is called the Texas Pinball Festival, but people fly in from everywhere.
That's right. Yeah. And if you bring a game, you get in for free for the whole weekend. You're a exhibitor.
Mike, it seems like it was about a year ago that you bought a pinball machine. I don't think you've even got it.
So, Texas Pinball Festival last March, I put $500 down on Pulp Fiction. I think we're getting it in March. So it's going to be a whole year where that one comes home.
Crazy.
So, anyway, pretty exciting. Anybody else? You got anything? Arcade news? Something you saw? Something fun?
I think, talking to you earlier, there's an an auction coming up, but I'm not sure what date it is. So I don't know if it's going to be before or after this, but there is a...
It'll be by the time you're watching this, it'll be after, but there is another one after that. We're in auction season, folks, so there'll be some videos coming to the channels for auctions, so that'll be fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, if you're watching this one, you missed that auction.
Right.
I should have mentioned that in the last podcast.
Should have, yeah. Dang it.
Oh, well, whatever. So there you go. So without any further delay, then let's talk about home console ports. So Arcade comes out. It's fantastic. It's anything we named in the last episode and more. And everybody wanted a piece of that pie, wanted to extend that quarter, past the operator getting their money. So they would make a game for the home consoles. And the home consoles at the time, I mean, you can start going back and to the Amiga, Commodore 64 and Television, Atari 2600, 7800, 5200, all the different hundreds of Ataris, Odyssey, Vectrex. I mean, really cool consoles.
Brought that in here.
I know, it's right in the other room. The NES, the Sega Genesis, Super NES. Then you start getting into some bigger stuff, some Xbox, PlayStation 2, or PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Xbox 360 ones, and Saturns and Dreamcasts and all that.
So much.
So there's a lot of consoles that games were ported to. So I feel like if we start where arcades became popular and we started seeing these arcade ports, I have to say, I think that in this situation where we're discussing games that were ported to consoles, but from a standpoint where we're going to be better off is the consoles we had. So I had an Atari 2600. So
had Atari 2600 as well.
You had an Atari 2600?
Actually, I still have one.
I still have one too. Yeah. And as you can see on the table here, I brought a little bit of my games from my collection here. Just were arcade ports. There's a lot of great games for the 2600. How about you, my friend?
At Atari 2600, I had a Commodore VIC-20. I had a Commodore
VIC-20.
64. All kinds of random things, actually. But yeah. This would actually, funny enough, this would be a freaking funny podcast if we had David here, because he never really went to the arcade. He only played them at home.
Right.
And when he started discovering arcades, it was the exact opposite about what we're about to talk about.
He's like, what are these trash games in these giant wooden boxes? He's like, I played this on the Commodore. It was way better. So.
No. It's not. I promise you.
Yeah, what is the Moon? He's like, Moon Patrol he liked better on something,
No. That's funny. We were talking the other day. He played Moon Patrol on the Commodore 64 and thought it was amazing. And he just recently played it on the one we have for the Time Rift, and he couldn't believe how much better it was.
Oh, okay, good. All right, good. I was like, I like it better on this. But not to precursor or anything, there may have been some ports that were actually
might have been
better. Yeah. Who knows? So anyway, so you had tell us about a game that you played early on that was an arcade port.
Oh, an arcade port. Well, I mean, I wanted to save this one for later, but I guess we can just get into it.
Sure, I don't care.
So Pac-Man.
Pac-Man,
So if y'all don't know, I played the hell out of Pac-Man when I was a kid. And the reason why is my mom worked at Walmart, and I had to spend a lot of time at Walmart waiting for her to get off. I had to get out of school. I had to wait for her to get off work, that kind of stuff. And there was a Pac-Man there at the front. I played it, 1,000 times. And I figured out, I didn't have any money. I figured out if you pop the coin door with your fist, just popped it like that, it would coin up.
Oh, fantastic.
Awesome.
So I was playing it for free.
I like that.
There was also a chicken machine.
The chicken, I was just say your egg machine. You told me that story
lay
too.
A free egg. But yeah, so everybody knew how much I love Pac-Man, blah, blah, blah. And my mom bought me for either Christmas or for my birthday, she bought me the Atari 2600 Pac-Man.
Oh.
And I had played Yar's Revenge, some other games.
Such a great port.
I loved them, and then I got this, and I'm like, what the hell is this? This is not Pac-Man.
Right. It's pretty wild, right?
It's like Blob Man with some dashes.
Yeah, it was a wreck. So you mentioned Pac-Man. So in preparation for this podcast, I played multiple arcade ports on multiple different machines, and I had a little rating on Pac-Man, and Pac-Man was better on the Intellivision at the time. It actually was a pretty decent, fun port. I would, if it was a out of 10, right? I said it was like a 6.5. Right. But in retrospect, I played it also on the 2600. This was last night, just getting prepped for this, and there was. It's weird because the ghosts were ghosting, right? So they're like kind of fading in and out. So, and they actually had a little color to them, but on TVs of the time, I couldn't tell that they did. And I played this on an LCD last night, and it actually had a little color. There were slightly shades of colors, but yeah, you're right. The dots weren't dots; they were dashes.
I watched a video back when you and I first started talking about building the Time Rift arcade. So that's been like 2 years ago. I'll find it and link it in the description. But the guy talked about the 1983 video game crash, and he specifically mentioned this Pac-Man as probably the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, Pac-Man. was a very on 2600. The Atari 2600 was a poor port. The map was weird. The ghosts were weird. The Pac-Man looked weird. His mouth didn't open like a pizza slice. It opened like a Muppet or something. It's weird. Not even like a Muppet. A Muppet is a better Pac-Man than this thing. It was like a weird, he had like a weird unhinging jaw.
Yeah.
So,
and then instead of little pellet dots, there were dashes. That
totally
were
dashes.
that
Yeah.
long, so.
I'll tell you what was fun about last night doing a little research and playing these games is the Atari 2600 has a certain sound that is just a beautiful noise that comes out of. I mean, it's god awful compared to other things, but it really brought back some memories on the 2600.
So the funny story about the Atari 2600 is it doesn't actually have a video chip.
Okay.
It actually works. It has some TTL logic chips that actually just read memory and put them on the screen.
Okay.
Really?
Right.
That's
So
interesting.
that's
Awesome.
one of the reasons the graphics of the 2600 are so chunky.
Did you have Pac-Man on the 2600, Roman?
I do. You know, it's this might be something I've never told you, but
Is this it?
Is that it?
That's it.
Yeah, there you go.
Pac-Man on the 2600.
That's amazing.
Not sure if I ever told you this, but I actually collect video games,
No way.
dude.
You collect video games?
video games, not just arcade games, but I collect all
I actually
the consoles.
collect a 2600 games.
So I've got 2600. So the funny way I got my 2600 was I went to a garage sale and they had a Pac-Man and a Return of the Jedi game.
Oh, that's a great game.
Okay.
I mean, it's a good.
So,
it's a game I look for really
was like-
hard.
I was like, hey,
it was a great game.
how much for these two games? And they said $2. I was like, cool, here's $2. They said, do you want us to help you carry the boxes? I was like, what? I got a 2600 with 90 games.
Woo!
Brand new controllers in the box, brand new power adapters, and they just loaded it all into my truck. So that's how I got my 2600.
My 2600, my great grandfather, actually, and I brought this. This is a Coleco tabletop, Miss Pac-Man. My neighbor Jonathan in White Settlement, right next to my great grandparents' house, he had a Frogger version of this, and I wanted it so bad because first of all, I like teeny things. Yeah. And it was a teeny arcade, and I wanted it so bad. So he took me up to Toys R Us, and I said, I want this game. And he got it, and he played it right at the Toys R Us. And he goes, this is crap. But he didn't say
That's awesome.
He didn't say crap because my grandfather wasn't going to short us on your great grandfather. My papa wasn't going to short us on words. He had a different word than crap. But he goes, "What else you got back there?" And the little Toys R Us had a cage. Right, and you took your little slip to the cage to get your video game.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, so the guy on their cage or girl, I don't even remember, but they said, well, we can get an Atari 2600. We can sell them that. And it was the Junior. I don't know if you remember the Junior. This is after the wood grain and the
It's
Vader.
the black with the silver around.
The black with the little silver, and it was real slim and thin. It was like a wedge. You could hold a door open with it, this little guy. And he said, okay, I want to get him 2 games. And he asked me what games I want. And the only Star Wars games I saw was Empire Strikes Back, which was really cool. You could shoot the walkers. It was not an arcade port. But the other one was, and it was the first time I ever played it, and it was Qbert. And so Qbert was, I loved it. I played the heck out of those 2 games.
On the 2600.
On the 2600.
Yeah. That's a decent one.
That was a decent port, right? And I didn't play that one last night because I felt like I would have gave it a higher rating out of nostalgic view of it. Qbert was my Atari 26. Those 2 games, the only 2 games I had forever. And because my papa bought them for me, my great grandfather. So anyway.
I do have a question. This may be some food for thought as we're going through these, and maybe this should be saved for the end, but I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Do you think that we're comparing these ports to what we know now?
Oh, that's
versus
a great question.
What we were looking at when we first got them? Because some of these ports, some of them were just bad at the beginning.
Okay,
yeah.
But when we were younger...
Pac-Man? No, this thing was garbage.
It's even... The pictures are garbage on the picture.
But hey, look, Pac-Man at least looks like a pizza.
Right.
Yeah, I totally... Now, I will say this about Atari's art usually was amazing on their cartridge.
Gar's Revenge was amazing.
Oh, it was so fantastic. Defender, Missile Command, they have beautiful art. Yep. There's an Atari art book, if you haven't seen all their art, and it has all these different great paintings, basically. But anyway, comparing is what you were saying.
Yeah, so comparing. So if we're comparing it to what we see now, some of these games probably aren't going to live up to that expectation.
No,
but we are talking about the difference between the ports, so that's good.
Right.
And but you know what? When we were a kid and you never played the arcade Pac-Man, and if you got that, you probably loved it.
I did. I loved it all,
Yeah.
and it was playable. I played it last night. The other thing Pac-Man didn't do, by the way, is when he would turn a corner, he would not rotate.
That's right.
Oh, he would just go up, right?
He just goes up.
Yeah.
This way,
Munching
this way,
like this.
This way. He might have turned around, but he did not turn and go up. He didn't follow the maze. He just rose and fall. So anyway, that was a fun thing I noticed. It was a different time. I will tell you, interestingly, on the NES port is actually pretty fun. Nintendo's Pac-Man, and what's really cool about the NES one, Pac-Man is a vertical mounted monitor game. And obviously when you were playing on your TV, you're a 2600 or Coleco Vision or in television, wherever I don't know if Pac-Man came out on television. But anyway, if you're playing it, we're playing it horizontal, which was wrong. But on the NES port, they actually put it vertical and actually put the number of men and stuff, just like information on the side. So they squished it right. And it's a really good port.
Yeah, I actually play Pac-Man on my phone. I got something little stupid.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's legit, but it's probably good. but it's perfect on the phone. Yeah.
Sure. And so you go into games like that, and then obviously there were games like this, where it was on an LCD screen. And this is a color LCD too, which I remember was actually pretty cool. So I think it was. In my mind's eye, I don't think this turns on anymore, but in my mind's eye, it was really pretty neat.
I don't know that I've ever played. There's another one I played that was like this, but
I believe that one had blue, red, and yellow lines on it, right?
Yeah,
It had different colors.
like that.
Yeah.
I think it's funny it has two joysticks.
I will find the.
Why does that
playing
have
it.
two joysticks?
Player 1 and player 2, so you can get right next to each other. And
Yeah,
play.
player 1 and player 2, bunch up. You thought arcade 1-ups were hard to play.
That's the original 1-up.
That's it, the original one. So, any other one? You got any?
As far as older games go, you got to have shout out to this. We talked about this on the last one, but Space Invaders was not the best port ever on the 2600.
No, it was terrible.
But
I didn't.
But it was
play that
better
one
than
last night.
Pac-Man.
yeah, but you can't deny that it was part of that 3.8 billion that they made while
Boy,
they sold those games. And
you ain't
again,
lying.
not adjusted for inflation. That's 3.8 billion in 1980.
Wow. Yeah. So a list of Atari 2600 ports, just very quickly. Kung Fu Master, Rampage was on the Atari 2600.
I had Rampage.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Asteroids.
Asteroids.
Battlezone is on it, but it's not vector. It's amazing though. It's really good. It actually has raster, and it's one of the prettiest games as far as that goes. But one that I liked even better in Battlezone was Robot Tank. If you've never played, if I'm going to recommend a game right now, I'll just throw it out there. If you have the ability to play Atari 2600, play Robot Tank.
Robot Tank.
Robot Tank was just like Battlezone. It worked the same way. Obviously, with Atari, you had one of the limitations of home ports is obviously the peripheral.
Yep.
Yeah.
Control.
So, you can't play Guitar Hero with an Atari 2600 controller. You know what I mean?
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. Somebody show me that. Give me a link to someone playing with a 2600 controller. But the robot or Robot Tank, but I'm sorry, Battlezone had the two joysticks where you push forward, back, or you turn like this. You didn't have that ability with the joystick there. But what was really cool about Robot Tank is it would have different lighting. Like it might be nighttime or daytime. It would have if it starts snowing or not. It would have. This is an Activision game. I'm pretty sure Activision made the best. If you got shot and you got grazed, it would take out your treads, so then you couldn't move good. It would jam your radar. Your radar would stop where you couldn't find them on the radar. It would jam your vision, so the screen would start so you can see like out of the computer because you're a Robot Tank, right? So really cool innovation on Battlezone.
I'll put that on MAME tonight and give it a go.
Yeah, Robot Tank's awesome. Berserk, Centipede, Crazy Climber, Crossbow. How the hell did you play Crossbow on the Atari 2600? It had a crossbow, so I don't know how that worked.
Oh, yeah.
Crystal Castles. That's a trackball game.
So it's I actually looked up one of that Crystal Castles is actually considered one of the worst Atari 2600.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was gonna be ET that held that.
Well, that's not a port, but
Yeah. So that's just the worst game.
that's just considered the worst game. I agree with you. Defender. I liked Defender on it. I remember playing that. I remember it fondly on the 2600. Dig Dug. I don't remember playing that on the 2600.
I don't think I ever did either.
Galaxian.
You know, one of the things for me, I always got the games that were the cheapest because we were a poor family.
Yeah, that's why I had an Atari 2600, folks.
So some of the games, some of the more expensive games, I never got to play. Dig Dug might have been one of those.
Oh, that makes sense. I just never saw it. I guarantee I have it because I just have a big collection of 2600 games. Galaxian. They never made Galaga for the Atari 2600. As a matter of fact, I had a 7800 and it was a pretty good port of Galaga. And I got 7800 much later in life.
Yeah.
But the 7800 was a lot like a Nintendo, like an NES. The Nintendo Entertainment. The graphics were
Significantly
8-bit
improved.
kind of graphics. Yeah. So, Jungle Hunt, Joust, Mario
I
Brothers.
did have Joust on the 2600.
Yeah. Joust was pretty common. I remember that on there. Millipede, Missile Command. Missile Command was pretty good on the 2600, wasn't it?
I think you played that with the paddle. Was that
Did you play with a paddle? I don't know if you could. That's only back and forth.
Yeah, I can't
Play
remember.
Warlords with a paddle. That was an awesome game on the 2600. That's an amazing game on 2600. I didn't even know that.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know if I had that game.
Moon Patrol. I don't remember playing that on
not
2600.
have Moon
Miss Pac-Man was a much better port on the 2600. Pac-Man, Pole Position, Space Invaders, Warlords, Gorf was on 2600, Wizard of War, Donkey Kong Jr., Zaxxon, Burgertime. Now, so I get to Burgertime. I played that one on multiple platforms last night, and I will tell you the 2600, I gave it a 3. The thing I liked about it, and I played this after the Frogger ports that I played, and I gave it a 3 just because it did have some continuous music, and the Frogger port has no continuous music, which is pretty bad. So, but it was so much. The Frogger port was bad, but the continuous music's the only reason that I gave it a 3 because the characters are completely unrecognizable. Some of them are just squares, like flat out. A square.
Wait,
it's like
you're talking about Burgertime.
Burgertime.
Yeah.
So Burgertime on the 2600 has, I don't know if it was supposed to be the egg, but they didn't even try. It literally looks like a piece of American cheese in the wrapper just doing this. That's all it is. It's a square doing this, but at least you get the dun 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 dun.
Oh, that is funny.
But it sounds like Atari 2600. It doesn't sound as like this voice box here. So
Doesn't sound like an angel.
doesn't sound like an angel.
Hey, I've heard Mike sing karaoke.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Anyway, that's about. I mean, Frogger, Cubert, Puyon, I think were some of the other ones. But those were Atari 2600 games that were ported that I've found. So.
This is one I was kind of, when we first started this podcast, I was thinking about, because I hear people talk about ports and then I hear people talk about conversions.
Okay.
Is there a difference between those?
I don't understand what conversions is.
So I think when I think of a port, I think of somebody rewriting the code to make it work on another platform.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of a conversion, I think this is just me, by the way. I know there's probably no definition of this. But when I think of conversion, I think they have to change the game to make it work on this platform. Like, for example, if it had a trackball, you're not going to have a a trackball on your 26.
Yeah, totally.
So that I would consider that a conversion. Right?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of these had to be conversions. I mean, we talked about Centipede. That's a trackball, and so is Crystal Castle. So is Millipede. So is Missile Command. So all those would have to be conversions. Then some games like Pole Position, obviously a conversion.
So I bring that up because I wonder if some of these games would be better if they had
the right
controller,
right?
You know,
the only one I can speak to, obviously, is Warlords, which was a game that I never played in the arcade. I actually played it at home first, and it has paddle controllers, and there are which you use for Pong.
Yeah.
Right, which I guess that would be an original arcade game too that came. But Pong turned into it had its own consoles, like a million of them.
Yeah,
they're just a Pong console. And you want to talk about probably the best first port. Pong.
Best graphics, arcade quality
Nailed
graphics.
the graphics. It was Pong. But Warlords is incredibly fun on the Atari 2600, and it is because it has the correct peripheral.
Yeah.
I think, can you use that to drive like pole position, the paddle controller?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
Put that in the
It's been
comments.
so long since I've played on a real 2600 hardware like that.
Mm-hmm. We have like 3 of them laying around the Starship just in the back.
Yeah.
Little wood grain ones.
I guess the next question would be if peripherals make that, conversions could also be some games just won't play on a home console, so they actually remade it, just use the name, but it's totally different.
Okay.
So now we're talking about is that a
Okay.
port or is that now just a
Right.
different version of the
Okay,
game?
so are you guys familiar with Pac-Man QC?
Yes.
The guy that does
Yes.
like the arcade.
Happy Little Games.
Happy
yeah.
Little Games.
Happy Little Games.
Shout out. He has got an awesome channel.
Watch Pac-Man QC. You can actually learn a lot of great history on any of these games.
At the end of almost every arcade video he does, he has a little section on home conversions.
Okay.
And I watched one just a couple of weeks ago, and he goes on and on and on about hard driving. They did a conversion.
Oh, God.
It's considered, in his opinion, it was considered the absolute worst home conversion ever made. I was thinking, okay, come on. And he was like holding it back. He wasn't showing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he shows what they called this like a hard drive. And remember, hard drive is a racing game, right?
Right.
Okay. It is literally like 2 lines and a blob in the center of the screen with some dots going by.
Yeah.
They
It's totally-
considered that a game.
I just kind of just took the name.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
So let's change that focus. What tell me again here on the subject you just mentioned?
Oh yeah. What is it? We're just talking about. Is it truly the same game just because it has the same name coming over? So when we're looking at these ports, which I've got a couple of them, I can tell you one right now is a good example.
Sure.
Dragon's Lair.
Oh, God.
You're
Yeah.
playing a
You
laser
don't have a
disc at the
laser disc
arcade.
game.
But now when you get it, it's a platformer. It's a totally different game. Great artwork on the packaging, but you put it in there, you're like, what is this? This is not
That's
what I
terrible.
want to play. This
Yeah.
is not even the same
It-
game. This is nothing. It's not even close.
Angry Video Game Nerd, shout out to James Wolfe. He does a great Dragon's Lair, terrible angry video game nerd episode, and it looks horrible. Like, I wouldn't want that. It looks so bad. You can't even get off the first level. You die instantly. You're really moving a sprite around, so you're not playing a quick time event like the game. So yeah, that's a tough one. That's a bad one.
Yeah, that's a
terrible
bad
port.
one,
Terrible
yeah.
port.
And you know what? There's going to be more bad ports in this segment, so just let y'all know.
So just to finish off my little research that I did, I'll save one for later. But the other games, I played Pac-Man, I played Burgertime. So Pac-Man on the Intellivision was pretty serviceable. It was I gave it like a 6.5, right? On the 2600, I gave it a 1.5. It's just not very good. I could still see myself having fun, but if I played it in the arcade and then played it on the 2600, that's what I would be comparing, and that would be tough.
And that's what happened to me.
Yeah. And the NES, the fact that they did such a good job, especially getting it vertical, I give it like an 8.5. So these are just goofy ratings, folks. Don't take them too seriously. The reason I want to mention these is because I was actually blown away by one system that I had not. I even had this system, but I only had one game for it, and I only bought the system to play the game, which I bought Star Wars Arcade for the Coleco Vision. Did anyone have a Coleco? Did y'all have a Coleco Vision?
I don't have one yet.
My aunt had one, and I played it routinely when I went over to their house. Dungeons and Dragons, specifically.
Fantastic. I didn't know Dungeons and Dragons was on that.
Yeah. Actually, it's a really good, really good, I thought.
That's super cool. So I had the Coleco Vision because I bought the Star Wars arcade game, as I mentioned, and that's all I had for it. But when I went to do the research on these, I played
you know what? Sorry. I think she might have had it in television.
an Intellivision.
Sorry, not a Coleco Vision.
Okay.
I'm getting them mixed up.
Yeah. So the Coleco Vision was fantastic. Like Frogger on the Coleco Vision, put some screens. Like, it looks so good, and it played good, and the music was good. I give it a 9. Like, for that
Wow.
time period.
That's a high rating.
Same thing for Burgertime. Like, Burgertime looks, sounds, plays like Burgertime on the Coleco Vision.
Do we know what year that came out?
I don't. I really don't. But Frogger, I was like super impressed. Like I said, in television, it was decent. I gave it like a 6, Frogger. On the 2600, I gave it a 3. I didn't have any, like, the music just goes away. And it's like, doo-doo,
Not even a
that's all you
context.
get. But I took and you can get a better vision of this. But this is the back of a comic book is basically this little piece of paper here. I was looking for the actual comic book because I remembered this. And if you go to I know we constantly plug the National Video Game Museum here in Frisco, but if you go to it, they have a whole wall of all the different Frogger ports all playing at the same time. If my mind serves
that's
me
great.
right. So you can actually see it on different consoles and play it. But just on this video game ad, it came out for the Intellivision 2600, the Texas Instruments 994A. Do you know what that is? Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't.
I have one.
Commodore
I'll show
VIC
it to you
20.
when you come to the pub.
Commodore 64.
Yep.
Came out for the Atari home computers. So is this like the 800?
700, 800,
Yeah.
400.
Atari 5200 and the Coleco Vision. And, they put the graphics for the 5200 on there. And I'm telling you, the Coleco Vision was the best of all those. Yeah, isn't that cool?
Arcade perfect ports.
Instead of lily pads, there's little arcade little console game boxes of all the different Froggers. Frogger was a Parker Brothers game, and they had kind of a unique cartridge design there. So again, you'll probably be able to put a better. Yeah. But we have it. We brought it here. So that's my. That was my my time with these retro ones. But we wanted to talk about, you brought up the point of these games just getting the same name, all right? And it really just being kind of a different game, but in a bad way. You brought up Dragon's Lair.
Right.
But how about games that actually were better than the arcade version of the game?
Oh.
Have you thought about this?
I didn't even think about that.
So I'll give you an example. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! It might be better than the arcade version. It definitely has more name recognition because Punch-Out! Did not come with Mike Tyson. You fought Sandman at the end.
So you bring up something interesting to talk about that. Actually, that was something I was going to touch base on was that, the player's choice and the versus cabinets.
Oh, yeah.
from
We'll
Nintendo.
get to versus and play choice cabinet. Yeah.
But, so we're talking about arcade ports, right?
Right.
That wasn't an arcade port. It is a port from Nintendo the other direction.
So I had the same question.
That's another one.
So,
Super Mario Brothers, right?
Right.
Same thing, right?
yeah. So, Nintendo was making so much money on the home consoles that they were like, we need to get these out so we could advertise more.
Right.
And we're better to advertise video games in an arcade. So they invented the player's choice and the versus cabinets. They put them out there so that way you can go spend 50 cents or $1 to test it out. And if you liked it, you can come home and play that game.
Yeah, you've totally went to the you went to the next level there. What about the reversal is what I called it,
Right.
where the console games became arcade games. And you mentioned I think Tetris
For sure.
is one, and that's probably the biggest, most bad to the bone one, right? Obviously the versus
And it's
games,
actually pretty good too.
yeah.
Really good.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. So, and they've made multiple versions of that, obviously, but Tetris versus Super Mario, you brought up.
Yep.
But you could also play the ROM, the Super Mario Brothers ROM on the Play Choice
Correct.
tin,
Yep.
which had these little ROM
Do we
sets.
have one?
We have one that we got from the abandoned.
The abandoned.
Watch the
building.
abandoned video.
Then we have a red tent.
There was one where, you don't get to see it on video, but Mike fell through the floor of an abandoned pool hall, and we got
So I lost about 3.5 feet of height in about 5 seconds.
yeah, it wasn't that long. Like a second. It was like
It's a millisecond,
bam.
500
It's like,
milliseconds.
are you okay? Are you dead? All right, you're alive. Good. That's a plus. Have
It's a
you
good
lost a
thing that
leg?
there was dirt and not a basement.
Yeah, I know. He was. It was to your knee, right? You didn't go to the
remember.
butt, did you?
No, I don't think so.
All right. No. He just got short real fast. So, but anyway, we got a play choice out of there. I don't know how those didn't fall through the floor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so versus Castlevania, versus anything Nintendo,
Right.
versus Goonies, I think was one of them, or
Yeah,
Top Gun.
they anything they could do to advertise is what that was truly it was before rental was available, basically.
So the Play Choice 10 games, the way they worked was you put a quarter in, you got a certain amount of time with the game.
It was all time.
So, and you could choose from different games. They had a dual monitor system, so it looked like Punch-Out.
Right.
Yeah, so that was going from console to arcade. Let's make some of that arcade coin
Right.
on top of that.
We also
cartridge
have
coin.
a Nintendo Super System. which is similar
Oh
concept.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you go to the SNES games, yeah. So, some of those games were slightly different. So versus Excite Bike, I believe you could do something in that to get like a golden bike. You could.
Yep.
It was a little bit better version.
Yeah,
Y'all
the
remember that?
verses was more they were more customized for the arcade, so that was just an improvement upon them. You know,
Yeah.
the
or was it?
Oh,
Was
it
it?
depends.
Yeah.
Depends how- it
Or
depends.
was it?
Hey,
Or was
there we
it?
go. Let's talk about the ports again.
Yeah. So, but going back to some of the things that I think became a better port. So, like, say Contra. I just put Contra on the floor today.
Yep.
And with Contra, you have a vertical monitor.
Right.
But when it got obviously ported to the NES, horizontal, so you could
Right.
see more of the
Yep,
screen.
I think that actually was an improvement.
That's an improvement.
That was an improvement.
Mike Tyson's Punch Out. You get to fight Mike Tyson. That's amazing in itself. You had collected stars. There was little cut scenes. I mean, it was a different game, but it was an arcade port.
Right.
And they never really ported it the other way that I know of.
Nope.
Other than being Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
I think that the Punch Out is more similar to the Super Punch Out that came out on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Ninja Gaiden, totally different game.
Totally different game. But you know what? Awesome game though.
It was cool.
No, totally
Hard
different
as
game.
balls.
Oh my god! And
It's
then
a really hard
the
game.
cutscenes on that—that's actually one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 on the Nintendo.
Oh, shoot. I hit a sweet
Awesome.
spot.
Dude, awesome games. But you're right; it's totally different.
Totally different game.
than the arcade.
Another one that people would consider is Kung Fu, like Kung Fu Master in the
Yep.
arcade is Kung Fu on the Nintendo. People like that one a little better. Bubble Bobble, they like that one
Oh,
a little
yeah.
better.
Well, speaking of Bubble Bobble, and we could just kind of go through that. So, we're talking about ports, but, we can't ignore the Neo Geo. So, when we're talking about ports,
This is
we
a
get into
great
the-
subject, actually.
So we're getting into ports like, I want to play this arcade at home, but I get it, and it's just not what you thought. Some things have changed, but then Neo Geo came out, and I remember that, their advertisements, they always had the Bulldog, or I don't know if you saw where they're like, do we cost more than the competitors? Yes, but does a Lamborghini cost more than a Pinto?
Oh, yeah. Let's go. I
so-
like that.
So they would show this, but the thing about Neo Geo is that they had 0 ports. Everything was the exact
Legit, yeah.
arcade game that you would play at home. So what they did was they created a console that was literally what was inside the arcade. They
Totally.
consoleized it till you could hook it to your TV, and the carts were rearranged so that way you couldn't interchange them. But
Which sucked.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know why.
yeah. I don't
So
know
good
why,
for that.
but it's literally the
Because they wanted to
exact same
milk
game.
those arcade operators.
They did.
They did.
They
the
absolutely
the
did.
only thing that was different about the game was that they gave you the option to hit start because it was on free play since it was a
Oh,
home
yeah.
arcade
That's
console.
it.
So they added an overlay that said, start option, and that's it. Other than that, the games are 100% identical. They
That's crazy.
are the original game.
Okay, so I have a question. You may have to look this up because I really would like to know for this subject. How much was the system, the AES? Because we're talking about the difference in a Neo Geo MVS, the multi-video system in the arcade, versus the AES, and that was the home.
I think if I remember correctly, I think it was either $3.99 or $4.99 when it came out.
Okay, so
Which
say
would be like a grand. to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
it was expensive, but then here's the trick, right? So like when you bought the Atari, it was like $120 or whatever. Then you get these games were like $30, $40 maybe. So the games usually were significantly different than owning the console. You can buy a
Right.
Nintendo, you get the other $30, $40 game
Yep.
on a $150, $299 or $199, whatever it was back then. This game cost that much. But then each cartridge cost that much because it was the arcade game.
Yeah, the cartridges ranged between $200 to $300, and even some of them went more. Now they're in the thousands a piece. Like
That's
if you want to
nuts.
buy home console AES games, they're in the thousands.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's cheaper to buy
it's
the
cheaper
arcade
to buy
machine.
yeah, it is cheaper to buy the
and,
arcade machines.
Get you a 4-slot
Wow.
with
Yeah.
some arcade cartridges.
Exactly.
So that kind of a tiny tangent, but that kind of brings up a thought process. So like today, like with an Xbox or a PlayStation, right? They're basically giving you that thing at cost or maybe even slightly below cost, right? Because they know they're going to get you on buying all the games.
Microtransactions.
But it didn't work like that back then.
No.
Right?
No.
Not at all.
So it was because that back in the day, you had to pay to make every single board. You weren't using a 2-cent CD or
Right.
3-cent.
Or today, you're just
digital
like sending it
download.
over the internet.
Yeah,
Right.
you had to pay for the packaging. You had to pay for the ROM chips, which memory back in the day was expensive.
Yeah.
Just to begin with, you had to pay for the manufacturing of that, getting it out of Japan into the U.S., and then advertisements.
Right.
No one's gonna go. You got to sell that to EGM. Remember EGM magazine?
EGM,
They had to
Game
give you-
Pro,
they had to give
Game
you some good
Informer
ratings.
eventually. I wish I could have found. I have a game. I forget what the Game Pro Tips and Tricks.
Oh, yeah.
And it was I have the very first magazine, the Tips and Tricks magazine, and it was the same year my brother was born, and it had all the different ports of Mortal Kombat, which we'll get to those here in a minute. But one of the things I wanted to tell you really quick on the AES, that's one I never. I wasn't a Neo Geo kid. There wasn't one around me.
Me either.
Or, I may have walked by them in the in our tilt in our Northeast Mall because it was just the biggest arcade. Right. But I don't quite. I mean, my vague memory of even being around.
I don't think I knew they existed until about 15 years ago.
Right.
I was World Heroes 2 Jet.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God. It was at a local video store that was down the street from us, and they had that and Puzzle Bubble. It's in every one of them.
Bust a Move. Yeah. The one game you cannot take out of your Neo Geo system is Puzzle Bobble or Bust a Move. Whatever you want to call it.
That game, World Heroes 2 Jet, really started me into liking fighting games. That was my first introduction to really into fighting genres, and I learned that 90% of the games on the Neo Geo are fighting games anyway.
Oh, totally. That was a fighting game machine. I think what it didn't do it for me was the fact that it was a big red box.
Right.
It was red box before red box, folks. So it's really
the original red box.
The original red box, multiple games on it, tiny little marquees. I mean, it's super cool now that I'm steeped in arcade lore every day when I walk into work, but and then all the different fighting games. I love fighting games, and we're talking about one of the best, Samurai Showdown.
So,
but I want to tell you my first knowledge of the AES system, and if you'd asked me even that year or even that day what the hell it was called, I didn't know. So I see this Neo Geo and I see the packaged games, and I was an Incredible. Do you remember Incredible Universe?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Arlington, right there.
I lived in that store.
Yeah, I figured you knew it very well. So I was in Incredible Universe, and I saw it in the display case, and I was like, oh wow, that's a different video game system that I didn't really have much knowledge of.
Right.
And I said, how much is it? And it was expensive. And I was like, well, all right, well, how much are the games? And they told me the price of it. It's like Samurai Showdown. And they're like, yeah, Samurai Showdown is like $400. $400? I'm like, you're talking about the system again. No. The games. Each game was as much as the system or more.
I used to go to Babbage's. And just look at the packaging.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. This is me at Blockbuster
I couldn't
Video.
afford that. There's no way I could afford that back in the day. I don't have a... I wasn't privileged.
Me neither.
Me either.
I'll tell you the crazy one that I looked at in the Babbage's was the Panasonic 3DO.
Oh yeah, I remember
it was like $700.
Real 3DO, and it really sucked. But it's
I actually still have it.
I have it.
Oh, you do too?
Yeah, I do.
Can we?
Okay, wait. Did you guys buy these when you were
Older?
Hell no.
Older.
Okay.
Older when they were dirt cheap.
I remember talking about it and wanting to play. They had an exclusive game on that. We're tangenting
Commander?
hard. No, it was Way of the Warrior. Was a fighting game.
Oh yeah,
only came out on 3DO, and I didn't buy it until 30 years later.
Wow.
So, but anyway, back to the arcade ports. That was my story on the SNK.
Speaking of arcade ports, 3DO, they have a fantastic port of Street Fighter 2 on it.
Oh, they do. That's
Actually,
one of the best.
One of the best games. Yeah. Out of all the ports.
Of all the ports,
that was
3DO got this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Too bad the controller only had 3 buttons.
Yeah, I know, right?
I don't know any way to play it.
We're talking about these ports and what they have, but the one thing that we haven't really touched base on, and I don't know if a lot of people even know this, is that the reason ports have been getting better is because the hardware that they started making into the systems was based off of now the arcade systems.
Right.
So,
that's totally true.
if you took at Altered Beast, it came out on the Sega Master System. Absolutely horrible game.
Yeah, but on the Sega Genesis.
But on the Sega Genesis, it was loosely based off of that Sega System 16.
It's that blast processing.
Yep, blast processing. Gotta love it.
Yep.
Sega.
But that's when ports started really getting good. Was I think Sega was the leader of the ports because they had the Sega 16, and then they went to the Sega STV, and that was for the Saturn, and those were really good. And we can get into more of the Saturn in a minute. But
I'm glad because I never owned a Saturn.
I didn't either.
Sega Saturn. That's,
my brother just bought one recently.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite systems. I actually,
wow. You're the first person I ever heard say.
I'm going to tell you guys something that you probably don't know about me. You're going to be blown away.
You never owned a Sega?
No, I did not. The last console I bought was an NES, and I didn't buy another console until the Xbox.
Really?
So
the Microsoft Xbox,
the first
360,
little
one,
the very first one,
that big hamburger controller.
Yep.
Okay.
So all of the stuff that happened between that, I never bought any of those consoles. Never played any of those games.
Mike's going to be quiet for the next 15 minutes. Well, I'm glad. That's good knowledge. That's why I thought I brought up at first. It really depends on your experience, you know.
Yeah.
So, and to you folks at home listening, if there's some experiences that you had that we didn't, please put it in the comments.
Because I was
We'd love to hear
I was
those
a computer
stories.
gamer all those years, right?
yeah.
I played PC games or Commodore before that, right? So,
Sure.
Yeah.
See, and I never owned a Commodore 64. I only know like one kid in school that had it. To be honest with you, it was cool that I think they had a Double Dragon. Boy, Double Dragon was ported to everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to say I might have played it once at his house. You know, that was the thing about video games as a kid. If you went to people's houses, and I don't know, your friends might have been nicer than my friends were, but I just never got a turn.
Yeah,
You know,
everyone
like-
always played. This is mine. I'm gonna play it. I used to.
You know,
always go
it's
to
my
friend's
birthday. I'm playing, and it's like, okay, well, that's you got me there. It's
Right.
not my birthday. On my birthday, I'm begging for this thing.
Right.
So, anyway, so do you have any other ones, Mike, that you can think of, like ports?
Not from that. No, I don't think so.
So you brought up a good point. Obviously, with you think the ports got better as
Yep.
these older systems, but that was something that I would like automatically snap to. But that's why I wanted to bring up these old ones, because the older games were a different set of hardware.
Yep.
To where, and they were ported at different times. So what you had was this as arcade. They kind of were doing this. Like the arcade game was better, the home port was weak, but then as the home ports got better, the arcades just kept getting better. But at some point, the home consoles started surpassing that, or
Big
at least
time.
being
Yep.
more equal.
Big time, yeah.
So we're kind of in that equal era when we're getting into the Super NES and into the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, I think that what happened was when you're looking at, we were talking about Neo Geo with the cost of manufacturing. Well, the limitations that we had was that carts were only had so many chips in them.
Yep.
And now we're talking about, okay, well, the hardware is now in the arcades is now getting better and better.
Right.
Now you can't have these chips inside the carts to be able to make them at least cheap enough for someone to buy. So now you're talking about something costing the cost of a Neo Geo game. You know, they're obviously bigger. So all of a sudden we went into the CD world.
Yep.
Right.
And as soon as we got into CD media and that was cheap, that's where we started seeing where you could actually fit bigger games onto the disc that you're having at the house. So you're looking at that turning point. I think that turning point is PlayStation, Sega Saturn.
Yeah. I think one thing that you guys didn't experience that I did though was playing games on PC. Is,
Totally.
You know, we didn't. You know, even before CD games, we had floppy disks, right?
Right.
And you might go to the store and buy a game like Wing Commander, for
know what
example.
you're going for.
Came on like 50 floppy.
That's right.
I mean, a stack like this tall. And this is
Star
not
Wars screensaver
Yeah.
that came
Yep.
on 4 floppy disks.
not a joke. You'd get
Yep.
you'd have a stack of floppies this big, and you'd have to switch them in and out while you're playing games. But a lot of that technology was there on PC gaming long before the consoles.
Correct.
Right.
And I think we're at a time now where it's almost turning into one, you know, to be honest with you. You know, when I talk about like the Sega Saturn and why I love that system so much, because it has some of my favorite games of all time. It's got Dungeon Dragons, Shadow of Mysteria. It's got Dungeon Dragons.
yeah.
It's got X-Men versus Street Fighter, which we're going to talk about that here in a second. And, you know, these ports are actually not possible on these consoles. So if you look at X-Men versus Street Fighter on PlayStation, it's a totally different game. It looks the same, but you can only choose one character. You can't swap out characters. They have RAM limitations. So now we're talking about system limitations of the hardware. Because
Sure.
now we've already got past the limitations on the software. So the Saturn, on the other hand, they forward thinking on that. So they made expansion slots and they had RAM that you could add to it. So they actually had arcade perfect translations of X-Men vs. Street Fighter where you could swap out characters and play just like you would in the arcade.
So-
And it looked the same, played the same, everything was the same.
So I like talking about limitations, and we can just like one step back so we can get a little bit of cartridge and a little bit of CD limitations, right? So when you got to those cartridge limitations, they did things like, so some of the things they do in fighting games especially would be frame rate. They would
Right.
cut out whole
They cut out
frames to
frames.
get the speed up.
Exactly.
Right. And so this would go to Mortal Kombat. I love Mortal Kombat, and when it came out, I was so excited. This is my original Mortal Kombat 1 cartridge right here.
Best port ever.
my God.
Best
Really?
port
That's
ever.
it. So
You kept it all these years.
I've had it all these years. So the great thing about Mortal Kombat was it came out on the Super NES and the Sega Genesis and the Game Boy and the Game Gear and the everything. You know, like trying to play a 5-button game, I should say, on a Game Boy with a green monotone screen and 2 buttons, you know, and they're trying to mix in the start and the select button.
You're right.
The Genesis was tricky if you didn't have the 6-button controller for the original 3-button because you'd have to, I think you might have had to hit start or
to
something
switch it,
to switch it to high kick. We'll talk about a nightmare. I just got a 6-button controller. It was pretty easy. The good thing about the Super NES, so now we're talking about peripheral limitations. What they would do in certain situations, they would cut a whole character out of the game just because they didn't have memory for it.
Oh, to store it.
Yeah. Characters missing. But the two most, the port for Mortal Kombat, the reason it has some fame or infamy, I should say, is the Super NES, the Nintendo was really a clean family entertainment system. And Mortal Kombat, you literally rip people's hearts out. So there's blood spraying everywhere. So they had to get really creative with the first Mortal Kombat. They, instead of blood spraying off you, they had like this kind of greenish gray sweat. So when you hit, instead of blood, it would like how much sweat is pouring out of the guy, right?
Oh my God. I never played it, so I'll have to put some.
When Kano rips out a heart, it looks like he's holding a medal or something.
I played it. It's like a goo, like I was holding Jello or something. It's not a heart because it's not even red. So when the Genesis and the Super NES, so they had Mortal Monday. This was a big port release and these great commercials where these kids are running around screaming, Mortal Kombat! Mortal Kombat! And Mortal Monday, all these ports came out for I think it was the Game Gear, the Game Boy, the Super NES, and the Nintendo.
You could play anywhere at this point.
And you could play this horribly violent game at your house in your own dojo. You could get your Mortal Kombat on. So the Super NES, I played them both last night. I give it about a 5, and
that's better than I thought.
I think 5. If you give it a graphics wise, I think the Super Nintendo looks a little bit better than the Genesis.
I was going to say that
the graphics are significantly better.
Yeah, you get a little better. I think you have better colors and palettes in a Super NES than you had in a Genesis at the time.
Definitely better sound on a Super Nintendo.
Wrong.
Oh my
wrong.
God. It might have been about track on Mortal Kombat.
Wrong.
But overall, they have better audio. In my opinion.
Your information is wrong. I played them both last night. I can guarantee you it's wrong.
I can tell you that the port of Mortal Kombat is better on the Genesis.
Okay.
I agree with you.
We'll get to that. Okay. We'll get to that. So the Super NES has a little better color palette, so it looks a little better. They're a little slower on the NES.
I think so.
They're kind of
no blast processing.
There's no blast processing, folks. You got to know about blast processing. Genesis definitely did what Nintendo don't on this one. So it was a little slower. The music is muddled on Mortal Kombat.
I think it is a little muddled.
It's pretty awesome actually on the Sega Genesis. The music's really good. But I only give Sega Genesis about a 6. It's only about a little bit better because the graphics don't look as good, but it plays faster and the music is good. But the most importantly,
ABA-C.
You could put in a blood code at the beginning, and you had all the blood.
It turned it on
all the fatalities. And I did them last night. I have screenshots of doing this and actually putting it in. You on a certain screen, the code was Abacab B. So if you want to try this, if you have a Sega Genesis and you never put the blood code in, you've always played it lame, which I don't know anyone that possibly.
Shame on you for not knowing this.
You type because you had ABC on the controller, ABACABB.
Yep.
And the letters would light up red. Then you knew you did it right.
Yep.
And then full blood, full fatalities, no censorship.
Now, was this something that they told people about? Or
no. All the gaming magazines.
Obviously, the game magazines found it out, but that's what caused the controversy because
every kid knew.
That's why this got taken to Congress. That's why they went in there. And
every kid knew. It was if you didn't have a gaming magazine, the kids on the playground were like, you can put the blood code in. If
Congress wouldn't have intervened, everybody would be freezing each other on the streets and uppercutting them.
That's
I'm glad they saved us. They saved us.
I'm glad they saved us from all them night traps. Yeah. We couldn't even go out at night at this point. So,
well, speaking of saving you, I want to do a little interstitial here.
Sure.
In our thing, I brought you a present, Mike.
Oh, you know what? I was going to get to how Scorpion would light you on fire. Now, that one was both in the NES and in the Genesis version.
Look what I got for
Wow. Look at this, guys. Hot Ones. So, what do we have here? First, We Feast presents Hot Ones. Hot sauce.
So if
Can
you
I open
haven't
it?
watched the Hot Ones podcast, they eat hot wings with all these
Whoa.
ridiculous hot sauces on it, and it's very, very spicy. And
Whoa.
we're gonna do this.
So, yeah, we
One
have
of
to do
our
a podcast Hot Ones. Heart Ones. I was thinking of the Kano fatality. Right? So, look at that.
In the
Awesome.
next 2 or 3 podcasts, you're going to get to see us eat ridiculously hot sauce.
The last dab.
Wings, yeah.
That's the hottest one?
I think I'll go ahead and get some like some Rolaids on order. And,
A bucket of Tums. Cynthia will have to let me know how many Tums I can have.
yeah.
Oh, I can't wait, Mike. That's
Can't
so
wait.
cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna do a Hot Ones podcast with we got to figure out a way to work that in, like when we have to eat one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love
Basically, every time you stop talking, you have to start eating.
that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right, keep it going, folks.
Talk! Talk!
And lastly, on just to close up Mortal Kombat, yeah, I did like the Genesis version better. I thought the SNES looked a little better, but the Genesis sounded and was faster and had blood. Right. So I gave it a whole point higher. I made it a 6.
there you go.
The Sega CD version, though, was advertised as bigger and badder. And actually, when you turn it on, it had the full motion video of that Mortal Kombat Mortal Monday commercial.
Yeah.
And it had really good sound. I only gave it a 7. The graphics weren't that much better. I thought it was going to be like back then. I remember they're advertising that as an arcade perfect port.
Even though that the graphics got better, they didn't have the right decoders inside of the systems to be able to play something at a full level decoding.
I gotcha. So it's unfortunate they didn't have any of these systems in between this time period after the NES.
Nothing.
Not a Sega Genesis, not a
Nothing.
Nintendo.
No.
That is surprising.
I know.
Did you-
Again, I was all PC games.
Did you play any arcade ports on the PC?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what do you...
I mean, so the problem is, like, I spent most of my time playing, like, World of Warcraft or games, like that, rather than what you would consider an arcade game, right? So, yes, I played some of them here and there, but I'd say 99% of my time was non-arcade stuff, right?
So
because I would get them off of, nefarious websites.
Right. Yeah. That was the age of really copying a lot of games over.
Duke Nukems and Dooms and Wolf.
I was about to go into those.
Yeah,
Those were, that's how I got into PC gaming, was first person.
Yeah,
shooters.
and none of those were arcade games.
That's a shame. They should have been.
No.
Yep.
Hey,
We were
got
talking
an
about
idea
that the
for
other
that.
day. Yeah, we were talking about that. Oh.
I think that when we talked about PC games and moving on from consoles that are getting really designed for that home port.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people may not realize that a lot of the systems that are actually in some of the new arcades, like for instance, Mario Kart has a Triforce in it.
It does, yes.
And for people who don't know what Triforce is, that's Nintendo, Sega, and Namco. They made a system.
okay.
So if you actually take the shell off of that Triforce, it's a GameCube.
It looks like
that's
a game.
hilarious.
It looks kind of like
so
a GameCube.
a lot of people don't realize it has GameCube ports on it, so you could play and put your memory card in there and play with the controllers on it.
You bring
So-
that up, DDR, when we took that apart, had a PlayStation 2
PlayStation
inside
2.
of
So
it.
that's the Namco system was, I think it's what was it system? Which one is that? I can't remember which Namco. Oh, the Namco 246 was a PS2.
Okay.
So that's using PS2 hardware, but it's actually souped up hardware, so it's a little bit more stuff in it. But it made ports easier.
Yeah.
And then we had the ultimate, the Naomi. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Naomi is actually a Dreamcast, or the Dreamcast is a Naomi. It's whatever
Right.
you want to look at it. But they're able to bring Marvel vs. Capcom 2 to your home, Street Fighter Third Strike to your home.
Absolutely.
And there are almost identical ports because they have the hardware in them.
Well, and bringing that on even into the future, like how many of these arcade machines are just a PC inside a Dell?
Oh, now.
That,
now they're
it's-
all just PCs and stuff.
But you take a game like Terminator Salvation, which is, I think, a fairly good. I know some people don't like it, but a fairly good arcade game. Have you played the PC version of it?
I'm not.
It's garbage.
Really?
It's absolutely garbage. Yeah.
Okay, so at least some modern arcade games have, are still better in the arcade. There's some games that just don't port to home.
Again, you can't. It's just not the same without a gun.
Yeah, and that's why driving games and shooting games, talking about going back to arcades, that's why they still remain popular, because to get that set up at
You
home.
can't
is
replicate
tough.
that at home.
It's very tough.
It's different.
Well, and even, like the super, what is it? I forget the name of it, but it's the Galaga that's like, this world's biggest Galaga or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Oh, right.
You can't replicate that experience at home.
Oh no, and that's why if it's not a shooting game, driving game, or some redemption machine, then it is big ass Galaga, or
Right.
it's like the idiocracy of old school game.
It is.
It's a wall game because we've got to amp up. It's not enough adrenaline to walk up to just Pac-Man
you have
in a
to be able to
box.
sell something that you can't do at home,
Right.
Especially if you want to bring people in.
Well, we talked about games that we're talking about arcades and experiences that are in the arcade. What about games that never got ported? Like X-Men. It never Simpsons. There's games that there were great arcade games. They never got ported.
I thought Simpsons got ported. I thought it did.
The regular Simpsons arcade was not ported.
Huh.
Ninja Turtles did.
I was
get
thinking
ported.
it was too, but I
Yeah, what's funny about Ninja Turtles was it was ported to the NES, and if you played Ninja Turtles on the NES, it was like a weird, different game totally. The home game on the NES was totally different than the arcade.
Right.
But then they came out with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, and
Yeah.
it really was a
The arcade
decent
game,
port.
yeah.
So, but some guys, I remember some games for the NES, like Shinobi, was ported. It was horrible.
It was horrible.
That was
definitely
a terrible
horrible, yeah.
NES game. I believe it was ported a couple times, like it was Tenjin and someone else, and Tenjin didn't have the
Right.
rights or something like that. So, anyway, there's some games that came out that just never ported them. And Simpsons was like a really strange one that never got a port. And I don't think the Konami X-Men did. I'm pretty sure Sunset Riders did. I know it got a port.
It was a horrible. It was a platformer.
Really?
Yeah,
Sunset Riders was a bad port.
It was at least the one I played, and it was
It's on NES.
I remember
or
jumping on
Super
a
NES.
train and going through it. I don't remember it being the same as the arcade.
I think you still did that in the arcade too. Ran on top of bulls. I know that. That's a
I
pretty
can't,
early
I can't
thing.
remember. I just remember it wasn't the same.
You didn't like it?
I didn't. I just
You didn't
remember
like
liking
it.
Yeah.
I didn't like it. So, but yeah, there's a few games, and I'm sure you can put in the comments below. What were some games that didn't quite get the cut and get to that home port? I never understood why The Simpsons didn't. That was such a popular game. I remember loving NBA Jam's home port was awesome. It had some really cool extras too. So NBA Jam has secret characters in it, but when it came to the Genesis, it had more secret characters in it.
Yep.
And you could be Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton. And this was like when they were when he was president. You could be I want to say Will Smith. I don't know if Will Smith was in one of them.
Well, you don't have to pay the president. If you're a like certain levels of politicians and stuff, you don't have to pay licensing because they're famous politicians.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Awesome.
I can tell you some terrible ports. The little dumb Tiger Electronic games were awful.
Definitely.
They're like, it was just like a calculator. The graphics were so crap. So that was a bad port for sure. Anything got ported to those. I still had fun. You think you got an arcade in the car, man.
Right.
It was pretty cool. So.
Like I said, it goes back to that time where we're saying, are they just bad ports? Are they bad games? Because some of them were bad ports, but they were great games.
Well, I mean, back in those days, I mean, my God, even into my 20s for that matter, there was a lot of times where I was just flat out bored.
Sure.
And like one of those would be on road trips. Your mom and dad are driving. They're talking about, dumb stuff at work or something that you don't care anything about. So even the worst port on a little thing would have been amazing.
We didn't have smartphones back then, guys.
Yeah,
Like,
Tiger Electronics was our car.
yeah. I was like, I just got to have enough double A's in my pocket to make this thing last the road trip. So, I think that's fantastic. Any other observations on arcade ports?
Sometimes you have to do it yourself.
Absolutely.
Go the opposite direction.
You got to go the opposite way. So I think you're referencing
Kombat?
Mortal Kombat again. Yeah, totally. So our Mortal Kombat 1 is Xbox, PC, Nintendo Switch, but don't play it on that, and PlayStation 5. What Xbox are we on?
Xbox One X. Right?
One X. Oh, Xbox
Series
X.
X.
Yeah, Series X. Series
That's
X. Yeah. So Series X, PS5, Switch, and PC, and we turned it into an arcade machine.
Sure
It's
did.
super, super cool. Gets the mess played out of it. I'm going to do a follow-up video and I'm going to zoom in on all the subtle damage you get just from play. Stuff like your ring hitting the joystick and things like that. So, but yeah, that's going the other way. And that's at Custom Arcade. I was reading some comments on our podcast earlier about what if you did a whole arcade full of custom games? And
it would be the most hard to maintain arcade
ever
created.
It would be.
It would be tough to maintain, but more importantly, it would be really hard to build all those games.
Yeah, I actually have an idea for that, and that would be something similar to what you talked about with the X-Men thing. Mm-hmm. We just have a pedestal and a screen on the wall and just have an Xbox and just call it a day,
All right, yeah, absolutely. I thought it'd be cool to build
PlayStation or whatever. But
there's another arcade, I'll have to look them up, and we'll spotlight them, but they've built a custom Smash Brothers cabinet. They built a custom, the modern Ninja Turtles that looks like the old game is really cool. They built a custom cabinet, but that's not the arcade I'm going to spotlight this week. So we're going to spotlight a different one. But how about you? Do you have any other touches on ports?
Like I said, the only thing is I'm a fighting fan, so fighting games are my thing.
Why you're here, brother?
Yeah, just the early ports were just so lacking that it was hard to play those, and that's what made me really want to get into arcades, just so I could play that original, especially the Capcom games back in the day.
Totally.
Street Fighter vs. X-Men, Marvel vs. Capcom, those all got spawned out, but they just couldn't translate those very well because of just hardware limitations.
Yeah. So I wrote one note down. I was just checking my notes about the video game crash in 1983.
Sure.
And I wonder, and I don't know that we could ever know for sure, but I wonder how many of these really terrible ports weren't necessarily because of hardware limitations. I mean, Pac-Man obviously was just a terrible port, right?
Right.
But they were just trying to pump games out as fast as they could.
So, in defense of like E.T., right? or maybe Pac-Man falls into this, but some of these programmers that were kind of busting their hump to get these programs out were put on insane time. Like, hey, you got 4 weeks.
No, some of them were like 7 days.
Right.
You have to write.
We need a new game.
Days.
We need a new game, and you got this much time. And so, that sent it into a tailspin for sure. That holiday season comes around, and I'm like, these games suck. We're not playing this anymore.
The point I'm thinking of is that maybe these games could have been way, way better on the exact same hardware, right?
Well, Pac-Man is a perfect example of that.
Right.
So you're not wrong. Yep. You're absolutely right. So,
and we see that today now. Games get better as technology progresses. The first gen games on a system are always better, or the last games that come out are better than the first games that come out because people know how to use the hardware better.
Exactly. The programmers are finding the shortcuts. There's console systems that failed based on how hard they were to write programs for.
Right. I saw this very interesting documentary about some programming on the Nintendo 64. Mm-hmm. And by the time it was all said and done, they unlocked, like, people are still working on it today on trying to code for it. And they're like, whoa, if they would have just known this when the system was out.
It's just
it would have made so much better games.
Yeah. Gave us a better manual back then. Right. We would have done better. Yep. Some of the CD, you brought up CD based, like some of the limitations. I talk about them taking stuff out, but some of the stuff on CDs was the load times.
Yep.
It would kill me.
Yeah.
Imagine
if you had 44 floppies.
Oh my God.
I bet, yeah. So games like Mortal Kombat 2 or 3, when you had Shang Tsung that could morph into other characters.
Just pause the game.
It would pause the game to morph. Well, that's a total game breaker, man. We're loading. And it was like, what? I'm in the middle of a fight. You're loading the next character in. Hold on. Yeah, hold on. I gotta change into Sub-Zero really quick. That's ridiculous. So it's like, hold on. We got stuff to fight. I gotta do some stuff. So, what this really segues into is probably our, a future podcast, if not the next one, is how these consoles caught up to the arcade graphics, and it kind of started causing people to not necessarily need to go to the arcade anymore because they could play these at home.
Absolutely.
And that slowly started,
as you mentioned, in some cases even better.
And obviously better, especially getting into those later days when stuff like Mortal Kombat Trilogy would come out. Now all of a sudden you got all these characters and stuff. It's like, I don't know how to go play Mortal Kombat 3 in the arcade anymore, or Ultimate for that matter.
And there was probably an ROI on it too, because if you think about putting quarters or dollar bills into an arcade machine, Doesn't take very many of those to just buy the game.
Exactly.
And you can't-
You don't have to leave the house.
Yeah, you can't play arcades in your underwear. Well, you can, but someone's probably going to come and get you.
Not very long. You just got to be really fast. You got to be fast and get out of there. I was like, I'm only playing for a few minutes. You're not going to have time to call anyone. So yeah, that kind of take us to the end here. I do want to spotlight another arcade that. Now, this one is solely for Roman. I'm sorry to leave you out, buddy. All right. You would think this place is super, super cool, but it's called Akihabara Arcade, and this is not in Japan, where Akihabara is. This is in Westminster, Colorado, of all places.
Oh, yeah. I've seen this, a YouTube video on this place, yeah.
Well, there's only like 2, so I don't understand. This should be very... look this up, guys. I can't find any much more footage than a couple of videos, actually. And one of them's 4 years old and one of them's 2 years old. And I was really hunting hard. And they're still in business, and they do fighting game tournaments all the time.
Really?
And when you walk in, it is nothing but candy cabs, buddy.
I am in heaven.
It is this.
Roman, I'll book our tickets.
This is.
Let's go.
It's in Madison. No, I'm sorry. That's all. It's in Westminster, Colorado. They take quarters. It looks like they teleported a Japanese arcade right out of Akihabara and put it right in Colorado.
That's awesome.
And you walk in, and they have cocktails and stuff that are themed to their games. They got craft beer. They have Blast Cities. They have Astro Cities. They have like 6 Versus Cities. They have Nameco, those Nameco candies that I don't know anything about. That I know that you do. Craft beers, cocktails. It's a fighting game paradise. It's a beautiful bar with all this anime stuff. And they fighting game tournaments weekly. I mean, multiple. And big ones that are streamed on Twitch, and they have a fighting game community up there.
I think I'm going to take a trip.
You've got to.
My wife just asked me, where do you want to go on vacation?
So go to Colorado.
Colorado.
Westminster, Colorado. It is really, really pretty neat.
That's awesome.
They have a whole area just carved out just for console fighting games. And I'm telling Roman, look at this list. I mean, Vampire Savior, King of Fighters, Ultimate Street Fighter 4, Blitzkampf, I don't even know what that is, Capcom vs. SNK 2, Dragon Ball, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Tekken 5, Royal Rumble on the WWF Royal Rumble, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, Soul Calibur, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, Tekken 7, Tekken 8, I'm sure now, Guilty Gear, Skullgirls, Under Night in Birth, Street Fighter 6, Project Justice. On and on. And they had fighting game turns for Blast Blue, Grand Blue Fantasy, all the Guilty Gears. I mean, it just on and all the Guilty Gears. So
I think that's where my next trip is.
It is.
That sounds fantastic.
It is, the new Mortal Kombats, Soul Caliburs, all the Tekkens, all the King of Fighters. So Virtual Fighter, Melty Blood. I mean, any fighting game you can think of, they're doing a tournament on. So if you're in Colorado, anyone, go to Westminster, Colorado, bring a roll of quarters because they kick it old school, and you can play all these Japanese. I promise you walk in there, just all you got to do is breathe it in. You're going to feel like you're in Japan. It's really, really pretty neat.
I'd go to that.
It's super cool, man. I would love to go. So
it's going to be fantastic.
Anyway, so... that's my shout out of the arcade. Anything anyone should play before we go?
I know we talk about arcades, but we're talking about ports. So if you could find anyone that has a Saturn that could play some import games,
okay,
try to do some compare and contrasting on that, because I think you'd be very surprised on the games that are that are ported over from
Sega Saturn.
Sega
All
Saturn.
right. How about you, Mike?
I'm actually not going to do an arcade game or a pinball machine.
A home port?
I'm going to do a home game.
What'd you play?
It just happens to be a game I've recently finished.
I know what it is. Go. We talked
Cyberpunk.
I knew it.
So I finally, I didn't play it when it came out because it got such terrible reviews.
Sure.
And they've fixed a lot of the problems, obviously,
right.
last year that people complained about. I played Cyberpunk, played it from all the way through. I got like over 100 hours in it now.
Wow.
And yeah. And I'm telling you what, it's such a rich game. Like the lore and the world that you can explore. It's a lot like Grand Theft Auto, just in the future with a whole bunch of stuff added to it, right? But
really
I
cool.
mean, you can walk up to a car, like pull somebody out, beat them up, take their car, drive off. Just like
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, just like Grand Theft
My
Auto.
brother loves this game. Tate loves this game.
He loves. Okay, well, awesome. So I challenge you, if you heard all the bad reviews about Cyberpunk, All that stuff's been fixed. It's amazing.
Okay.
Go play it.
It's awesome.
So, well, I'm not going to let you off the hook here. Tell us about the gun that sings to you.
Oh, yeah.
You got to do it. Here's Mike singing, voice and go.
Yeah, so there's a gun you can get. It depends on the way you play the game, but you get it roughly halfway through the game, and it's called Skippy.
Skippy the
And
gun.
Skippy has an AI on it, and it like reads your fingerprint or whatever, and it's an AI. And it bonds to you. And as it configures itself or as it does other things, it like tries to entertain you. And so like it starts like it plays like a hold music basically. Bum 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 be dum bum.
Bum bum be dum bum bum.
What are you doing?
I'm making the wait more pleasant with a soothing melody.
Yeah, it's a Rihanna
It's a
song.
Rihanna
right?
song, yeah.
What song is
It's
that? Dum
hilarious.
dum dee dum 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 dum. What song is that?
Maybe it's the way y'all are humming it.
Oh, well, the gun hums it really
Well,
fun.
he does hum it kind of funny. It's like it's comedic.
Bum, be bum,
Yeah,
right?
be bum bum dum, right? But and then like every now and then you'll just pick the gun up and it'll just fire,
Oh goodness!
and it'll just go, oh sorry, premature discharge.
Oh,
that never
no.
happens.
That never happens.
I mean it has all
Awesome.
all these comedy routines.
That's really fun.
I will warn you though, spoiler, I will warn you that if you get to a certain point, you find out who the gun's real owner is, and you have the option to take it back to them.
Oh, okay.
Do not do it because you don't get the gun back.
Oh, that's a cool gun. You want to keep that
you
gun.
want to keep that
so.
gun. If you do it, you get screwed. So
I love it. I challenge anyone to play Killer Instinct this week.
yeah.
Just a fun fact about Killer Instinct I thought was cool is that and it's kind of a recent learn, is the programmers made it to where as you got a higher combo, it would raise the volume. So an operator puts this game on the floor and he sets the volume to what's in front of it, right? Like
Right.
Who's standing in front of it. But back in the day, Nintendo or Rare, whoever, or Midway, I don't know which involved party of all three of those did it, but they put it to where, when the game first starts, people start learning it, it's going to be the same volume as Mortal Kombat and Tekken and all the other fighting games it was competing with. But as you got better, the combos got louder. So as the game, the longer it sat on the floor, the better people would become, and the more it's going to say super combo ultra combo. It's actually going to say it at a higher volume. At least that's what I heard.
And it gets people's attention.
And it gets people's
on
attention, and that quarter goes in that machine instead of the other ones.
Absolutely.
Pretty genius. I thought that
genius.
was super cool. That's a cool story. Don't know if it's true. Look it up. And that's what people are saying. So I don't know.
Everybody's saying.
Everybody's saying it. Everybody is saying it.
I'll automatically throw in there. That's probably where the car's volume goes up when the faster you go. They borrow that from more.
Maybe.
Who knows?
That's what I've heard.
Urban lore.
That's what people are saying. Everybody's saying it. So anyway, I think that's going to close it up for this podcast, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. This was episode 4. And please like and subscribe on the Time Rift arcade channel and also the Electric Starship arcade channel, because we're going to have more great content. If you like arcades, if you don't like arcades, it's probably not for you.
Right.
So,
Hey, and for that matter, if you don't like podcasts, we have plenty of other videos.
yeah, there's all kinds of other fun stuff. And we're the video on Texas Pinball Festival, multiple arcades that are going to go into the new place that Mike and I
Arcade
are
restorations, builds, custom builds to Mortal Kombat.
finding stuff, all kinds of fun things. So, auctions. Yeah. There'll be auction videos hitting around this time too. So, you have anything else there? young
Just
Roman?
don't forget to put your favorite port in the comments. So that way we can
Please
see
put
what
your
yeah.
favorite or worst.
Or worst. Yeah, even the worst.
For better or for worse. How about you, Mike? Any closing statements there?
No, I'm good.
All right, we're all
This
out
has
of
been a-
gas. We've podcasted on out here. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you on the next one.
See you soon.
See you soon.